December 20th, 1943. 30,000 feet above the heart of Germany, a wounded B-17 drifts through the frozen air. Its engines cough smoke and fire, its frame torn apart by flak. Inside, 9 young men cling to life, faces pale from blood loss, hands trembling against frostbitten metal. Below them, the war rages on. Above them, only silence and sky. Through that silence, another shape cuts across the clouds. A German Messerschmitt BF-109. Its guns glint in the pale winter light. The distance between hunter and hunted closes in a heartbeat. Inside the bomber, eyes widen. There is nowhere to run, no guns left to defend, no prayer strong enough to change what's coming. The German pilot, Franz Stigler, keeps his hand steady on the trigger. One squeeze, and the crippled B-17 will fall into the snow below. His radio crackles with static, his thoughts louder than any command. He has fought this war too long to mistake mercy for weakness. But something in this moment stops him. The American pilot, Charlie Brown, meets his gaze through a shattered window. Neither man speaks, yet a strange stillness forms between them, a fragile bridge suspended above the ruins of the world. 2 enemies, separated by language, joined by something greater than duty. The wind howls around them. For a few eternal seconds, the sky itself seems to hold its breath. What happened next would defy orders, defy reason, and echo through history as one of the most extraordinary choices ever made in war. But to understand that moment, to understand the weight of a decision made 30,000 feet above a burning continent, we must go back to the morning when that mission began. Morning breaks cold over the English countryside. A thin mist clings to the runways of Kimbolton Airfield, wrapping the rows of silver B-17s like ghosts waiting to be awakened. Ground crews move quietly between them, their boots crunching against frost. Steam rises from coffee tins, and the breath of men who've seen this ritual too many times before. Inside a wooden briefing hut, the air is heavy with cigarette smoke and nerves. A red line stretches across the map, England to the German city of Bremen. Beneath the dull glow of lamps, officers murmur the day's orders. The target, the Focke-Wulf aircraft plant, beating heart of Germany's fighter production. The mission, destroy it, no matter the cost. Among the rows of weary faces sits Second Lieutenant Charlie Brown, only 21 years old, and commander of the B-17 they call Ye Old Pub. Around him are the men who will entrust their lives to his hands before the morning is over. Pinky Luke, his co-pilot, Al Doc Sadoc, the navigator, Sam Blackie. Blackford crouched somewhere below in the ball turret. 10 souls in all, each carrying their own small piece of home, a letter, a photograph, a lucky coin. An older captain steps to the front. Weather's rough over the channel. Flak expected heavy, fighter opposition strong. His voice doesn't tremble. It never does. He's given this speech 100 times. The men still listen like it's their first. The chalk squeaks across the board. Assembly altitude, 22,000 feet. Bomb load, 5,000 pounds. Target ETA, 11:30. No one asks the question that hovers in the room, who won't come back? Outside, engines begin to rumble. The first sound of hundreds of Wright Cyclone engines spinning to life rolls across the airfield like thunder. Ground crews wave signals, propellers blur to silver discs. The sky itself seems to shudder. Charlie climbs the ladder into the nose of the bomber. The metal is cold under his gloves. He settles into the pilot's seat, the smell of oil and aluminum mixing with adrenaline. Run-up complete, Pinky reports. Engines all green. For a brief second, there's calm, the kind that always comes right before takeoff. Charlie glances at the photograph tucked beside his controls. his mother standing on a porch in West Virginia, sunlight in her hair. He touches it once for luck. "Let's bring everyone home," he mutters. At 09:15, the first bombers roll. Ye Old Pub follows, heavy with fuel and faith. Wheels leave the ground and England drops away beneath a blanket of white cloud. Above them, formation after formation joins in, columns of silver stretching farther than the eye can see. Nearly 500 B-17s, escorted by P-47 Thunderbolts, rise into the pale December sky. The radio hums with chatter, codes, and nervous laughter. From cockpit to turret, the crew checks their guns, their oxygen, their courage. The sun flashes off the wings in bright shards of light. It almost looks beautiful, like a sky made of mirrors, until you remember what all that light is heading toward. As the coast fades behind them, the mood inside shifts. Conversation dies down. Each man retreats into silence, listening to the heartbeat of the engines. The navigator marks their course across the North Sea. The gunners scan the horizon for black puffs that mean flak. Somewhere up front, Charlie keeps his eyes on the endless stretch of blue ahead. The intercom crackles. "Hey, Skipper," someone says, half joking, half serious. "You think Bremen's awake yet?" "They'll know we're coming," Charlie answers quietly. Over the radio, another pilot's voice breaks in with a low whistle. "Look at that view, boys. Whole skies filled with fortresses." Someone else replies, "And each one carrying a prayer." The clouds thicken, sunlight fading to gray. Icy air seeps through the fuselage. The crew knows what's waiting on the other side: enemy fighters, flak towers, and the cruel mathematics of survival. Still, they press on, one more mission in a war that seems to have no end. In the distance, the horizon glows faintly orange. That's the coast of Germany. Beyond it lies Bremen, and the day history would never forget. The North Sea lies silent beneath them, a flat sheet of steel reflecting the gray of the morning sky. At 25,000 feet, Ye Old Pub crosses into German airspace. The calm is deceptive. From above the clouds, everything looks still. No gunfire, no smoke. But every man aboard knows that somewhere below, hundreds of German gunners are already tracking their altitude. "Flak area ahead," the navigator warns through the intercom. Charlie tightens his gloves on the yoke. "Keep your eyes open, boys. This is where it starts." Moments later, the first black puff appears outside the left window. A small bloom of smoke that vanishes as quickly as it forms. Then another and another. Within seconds, the sky is alive with bursting shells, each one echoing like thunder across the aluminum skin of the bomber. "Flak! 3 o'clock low!" someone yells. The plane jolts hard. A metallic clang rings through the fuselage, followed by the unmistakable hiss of air escaping through new holes in the hull. The smell of cordite mixes with frozen air, sharp and bitter. "Engine 2's losing pressure," Pinky calls out from the co-pilot's seat. Charlie glances left. Oil sprays across the wing like black rain. "Feather it. Shut her down before she cooks." He feels the vibration ease as the propeller slows, then stops. One engine gone, 3 left to get them home. Outside, the formation stretches like a city in motion. Hundreds of B-17s are moving through columns of smoke and fire. Some are already trailing vapor. One catches a direct hit and tumbles downward, leaving behind a spiral of debris that vanishes into cloud. No parachutes appear. The radio crackles with half-broken calls for help that fade to silence. Inside the pub, the temperature drops fast. The cockpit windows are rimmed with frost. The oxygen masks crunch with ice. Breath turns to vapor instantly. The sound of machine guns rattle from the other ships. A distant percussion in the storm of flak. "Navigator, how far to target?" 15 minutes, sir," maybe less if we hold this speed. Charlie nods, eyes fixed ahead. Then we hold it. Another explosion erupts close on the right. The shockwave slams through the bomber, tossing the crew against their belts. A shard of plexiglass shatters from the nose cone, scattering across the cockpit. Cold air floods in like a living thing. "Skipper, we've got a hole in the nose. Al's hit." "Is it bad?" "Just a graze. He's patching up. Says he can still see straight." From the waist position, Blackie's voice breaks through. "Fighters climbing on the horizon. Looks like FWW-190s forming up." "Stay tight with formation," Charlie orders. But even as he says it, he feels the plane slipping back. With one engine dead and another running rough, Yeah Old Pub can't keep pace. The other bombers surge ahead, engines roaring in perfect symmetry, leaving the wounded ship behind. "Can't hold with them, Skipper," Pinky mutters. "We're falling out of slot." "I know. Keep her level. We'll catch up after the drop." He doesn't believe it, but he says it anyway. The crew needs hope more than truth. The flak thickens near Bremen, great black blossoms rising like storm clouds. Each burst flashes white at the center, fragments spinning outward like sparks from a forge. The sound is relentless, a drumming that shakes the bones. The plane feels smaller with every hit, as if the sky itself is closing in. Then, a deep, metallic thud reverberates through the fuselage. "Hit under the right wing," someone shouts. "Fuel line's leaking." Charlie fights the controls as the bomber lurches sideways. Instruments flicker. A loose cable dangles near his feet, snapping with static electricity. "Hold her steady," he says through clenched teeth. "Don't let her roll." The intercom crackles again, now with the strain of voices on the edge. "Tail gun's freezing up, Skipper. I can't traverse." "Keep trying. Warm the barrels." A pause, then a weary laugh. "Trying, sir. It's colder than the devil's heart back here." The humor fades as another explosion rips through the sky, just off their left wingtip, showering the cockpit in shrapnel. Pinky shields his face. Charlie feels the sting of a fragment nick his cheek. He wipes the blood away, steadying the controls. Through the cracked glass, the distant outline of Bremen appears, the factory roofs glinting beneath a shroud of smoke. "Target in sight," Doc calls from the navigator's table. Charlie exhales. "All right, boys, we've come this far. Let's finish the job." Below them, anti-aircraft batteries roar in defiance. Above them, the rest of the formation presses on, a river of silver moving through fire. But Yeah Old Pub lags behind now, alone and wounded, its shadow falling across the broken clouds. For the men inside, the war has suddenly become very small. Just one crippled bomber against an endless sky. The city of Bremen rises through the haze below, gray rooftops, factory chimneys, and the black grid of the Focke-Wulf aircraft plant. The ground itself seems alive, pulsing with muzzle flashes as anti-aircraft guns unleash a storm of steel into the winter sky. "Flak ahead! Brace!" The shout echoes through Yeah Old Pub, just as the first shell bursts directly in front of them. The explosion rattles the bomber so hard that every bolt seems to scream. Bits of metal tear across the nose and through the fuselage like angry wasps. Charlie grips the controls, eyes fixed on the crosshairs. "Hold it steady. Bomb bay doors open." Beneath them, the great belly doors creak apart, revealing the factory sprawling below, like a patchwork of gray and fire. "On target," Doc calls from his station. "Steady, steady." The bombardier releases the payload. 5,000 pounds of bombs fall silently for several seconds before the earth erupts in orange flame. The shockwave reaches them moments later, punching through the cabin. "Bombs away," the intercom confirms. But no one cheers. There's no time. The flak is heavier now, closer, almost intelligent in how it tracks them. "Hit on the starboard wing," Pinky shouts. "Fuel's streaming out." Charlie feels the aircraft lurch. The second engine coughs, sputters, then dies completely. The sound fades into a sickening silence on one side of the plane. "Feather number 2, Charlie orders, but his voice is tight. Pinky moves quickly, flipping the switches, his gloved hands trembling. Done. She's gone cold. Almost immediately, the fourth engine begins to over-rev. The RPM needle jumps erratically. The whole plane starts to vibrate. Engine 4's out of balance. She's pulling us right. Charlie adjusts trim tabs, fighting to keep the bomber level. "Ease the power. Don't overheat it." He looks out the window. Both wings are scarred, peppered with holes, large enough to crawl through. Oil streaks trail back in the wind like black ribbons. "Tail section reports damage," comes a faint voice through the intercom. "Who's hit?" "Ecky's fine, but we've got holes everywhere. We've lost hydraulic pressure." Another explosion, closer this time. The light inside the bomber flickers out for a moment as power stutters. A scream crackles over the intercom from the waist section. "Russian's down! He's bleeding bad!" Doc scrambles from his chart table to grab the medical kit. He slides down the narrow corridor toward the wounded man, slipping on frozen blood. "Hang on, I've got you," he mutters, voice shaking but steady enough to calm the rest. Outside, the sky is chaos. B-17s tumbling, burning, breaking apart. Some spin down through the clouds, trailing smoke like comets. Parachutes blossom in the distance, white dots drifting over a world on fire. Charlie watches one of the falling bombers pass beneath them, its wing shearing off before it disappears into cloud. He doesn't have the luxury to mourn. "Maintain heading," he shouts. "We're not done yet." Inside the cockpit, shards of frost cling to every surface. The oxygen gauges twitch dangerously low. Pinky's voice is barely audible through the static. "We're losing altitude, Skipper." "I know. Keep her level as long as you can. We'll make the turn after the target." The bombardier's voice breaks in, calm but exhausted. "Target's hit. Factory's burning." Charlie exhales, half relief, half disbelief. "Then we're getting out of here. Prepare to turn home." He banks the aircraft west, but the bomber doesn't respond the way it should. The controls feel heavy, sluggish, as if the sky itself is trying to hold them in place. "Rudder's sluggish," Pinky says. "Half the control cables are gone," Doc replies grimly from the rear. Below, flak still blossoms like black flowers across the horizon, but the rest of the formation is pulling away. Dozens of fortresses still intact, climbing higher toward safety. The old pub can't keep up. "Formation's leaving us behind," Blackie says quietly. Charlie doesn't answer. He doesn't need to. Everyone knows it. Minutes drag by. The explosions fade into the distance, replaced by the low groan of failing engines and the moan of wind through broken metal. The plane shudders as it clears the last of Bremen's flak field. Inside, Doc wipes blood from his hands. Russian's still breathing, barely. "Do what you can," Charlie replies, voice hollow. At 12,000 feet, they break free of the smoke. Sunlight glints on the shattered glass of the cockpit, a cruel reminder that the mission is over. But the nightmare isn't. "Status?" Charlie asks. "Engine 2 dead. Engine 4 coughing. Tail guns jammed. Hydraulic line gone. We've got holes in both wings." "In other words," Pinky says, forcing a half smile, "she's still flying." Charlie gives a short nod. "Then so are we." Behind them, the rest of the 8th Air Force is already vanishing into the horizon. Hundreds of contrails slicing the sky in perfect order. The old pub trails alone, wounded and limping, its engines wheezing like tired lungs. Below, the flak gunners reload. Above, somewhere out of sight, German fighters are beginning to climb. The mission was done. But the battle, and the moment history would remember, was only just beginning. The smoke of Bremen still lingers behind them, but peace never lasts long in enemy skies. The crew of Ye Olde Pub can see the formation far ahead, glinting silver specks fading into distance, while their own crippled bomber limps west, dragging a trail of oil and faith through the clouds. Charlie glances over the left wing. What's left of the paint is burned and peeled away. Engine 4 coughs once, then steadies at half power. He keeps his hands on the trembling yoke, eyes darting between gauges that no longer tell the truth. The intercom crackles. "Skipper, I've got movement. 6 o'clock high." It's Blackie from the ball turret, voice shaking. "Looks like 109s, 5 of them, and a few 190s coming in fast." The words hang heavy in the cabin. Everyone knows what that means. Out here, alone and slow, they're a floating target. "Positions!" Charlie barks, his throat raw. "Gunners, keep it tight." The waist gunners brace, hands stiff on frozen triggers. The ball turret spins to face the rear, whining weakly as its gears protest the cold. Then they see them, dark crosses diving out of the sun, wings slicing through light. The German fighters fall like hawks toward bleeding prey. Here they come. The first pass tears across their tail. A line of bright tracers cuts through the air, walking up the fuselage and punching through the rear gunner's glass. The sound is a savage tearing, metal, canvas, bone. Eki never has time to shout. "Tails hit! Eki's gone!" someone screams. The aircraft jerks as bullets rip through the rudder, severing cables and filling the cabin with the stench of burning insulation. Sparks dance like fireflies in the thin air. Blackie swings his turret and fires, the vibration rattling his teeth. "Got one! He's breaking off!" he yells, though the words sound distant even to himself. His gun jams halfway through the next burst. "Turret's frozen," he calls out, slamming the release lever. The mechanism doesn't move. From the waist section, Russian groans clutching his side. Shrapnel has torn through his jacket. "I'm hit again, but I'm good," he gasps, trying to load another belt into the gun with blood-slick fingers. The German fighters bank around for another pass, sleek and precise. The FW-109s split high. The 109s come low, their yellow noses flashing in the pale light. The air fills with gunfire, tracers streaming past like molten rain. Charlie feels the bomber lurch violently. "Hold on," he shouts. Oxygen lines snap loose above him, whipping around like snakes. A sharp hiss fills the cockpit. His mask ices over in seconds. He tears it off, gasping cold, thin air that burns his lungs. Pinky slams a gloved hand against the side window. "Right wing's on fire." "Cut fuel to number 4, Charlie orders. The fire sputters, then dies, leaving a jagged black scar across the wing's surface. Another rattle of gunfire shreds the left side of the fuselage. The waist gunner crumples to the floor. "Frenchie's down!" Doc yells, crawling toward him with the first aid kit, his breath forming clouds in the freezing air. The plane shudders again, hits square under the tail. The rudder jerks sideways and locks. "She's not responding!" Pinky cries. Charlie wrestles with the yoke. The horizon tilts. "We're going down!" The B-17 spirals, engines screaming, the sound a long mechanical cry echoing through the cabin. Loose shell casings, papers, and spent cartridges whirl in the air. "Hang on! Hang on!" They fall through the clouds, wind roaring past the fuselage like a river. Blood runs down the walls, freezing before it can reach the floor. At 4,000 feet, Charlie pulls with everything he has. The control column groans but holds. The bomber levels out just above the treetops, skimming the snow-covered fields of northern Germany. Branches blur beneath the wings. The crew can almost see the shadows of houses. For a moment, There's nothing but heavy breathing and the relentless moan of the engines. Altitude 200 feet, Pinky whispers. You did it. Charlie nods, too exhausted to answer. Behind them, the German fighters circle once more, but they don't fire. The B-17 is clearly dying, trailing smoke like a wounded animal. Most of the fighters break away, heading home to rearm. But at one small airfield near the coast, the roar of that falling bomber catches a pilot's ear. On the ground, a young Luftwaffe ace named Franz Stigler wipes oil from his hands. His BF-109G sits ready, refueled and waiting. He's already flown one mission today, already stared death in the face, and won. He needs only one more confirmed kill to earn the Knight's Cross, Germany's highest honor for valor. He hears the deep, uneven rumble of engines overhead and looks up. The American bomber drifts low across the horizon, smoke pouring from its tail. Easy prey. Without hesitation, Stigler climbs into his cockpit. The engine roars to life. He rolls down the runway, snow scattering beneath the wheels. As his plane lifts into the air, he adjusts his gun sight and mutters to himself, "One more victory. Just one more." He turns toward the wounded bomber glinting weakly in the distance, unaware that what happens in the next few minutes will change both of their lives forever. Franz Stigler climbs steadily through the low winter clouds, his Messerschmitt BF-109 shuddering slightly in the thin air. The engine growls beneath him, steady and familiar. Ahead, in the pale distance, he can already see the dark column of smoke marking the wounded American bomber's path. "Come on, just hold together a little longer," he murmurs to his aircraft, as though speaking to an old friend. The altimeter ticks upward, 5,000 feet, 6, 8, until the silver shape of Ye Old Pub emerges from the haze. Through his gun sight, the B-17 looks enormous, slow, heavy, vulnerable. He could almost feel the satisfaction already. One final victory, one step closer to the Knight's Cross. All he needed to do was line up his shot and squeeze the trigger. But as he closes in, something feels wrong. The bomber isn't flying like a machine ready for battle. It's staggering, listing to one side, its engines coughing unevenly. Great holes gape in the fuselage. The tail section is shredded, wires hanging like torn veins. Oil streaks the body from nose to rudder. Stigler eases off the throttle, curiosity replacing adrenaline. He glides closer, just a little, and what he sees next stops him cold. Through the shattered plexiglass of the tail, he spots the body of the rear gunner, slumped motionless over his guns. One of the waist gunners lies on the floor, his leg wrapped in a blood-soaked bandage. In the cockpit, the pilot's head moves sluggishly, fighting exhaustion, maybe shock. "This isn't a plane," Stigler whispers to himself. "It's a coffin still flying." He could end it now. No one would ever question it. The bomber's death would be just another statistic in a war that had already eaten millions. His own fuel was low. His chance at the Knight's Cross was right in front of him. But then, somewhere deep inside, another voice speaks. One older, quieter. He remembers his first commander, Gustav Rödel, standing before a line of young pilots on the sunlit field of Yevor years earlier. "If I ever hear of one of you shooting a man in a parachute," Rödel had said, "I will kill you myself. You fight with honor, or you are no knight of the air." Honor. That word echoes now in the cabin louder than the engine itself. Stigler exhales slowly and lowers his hand from the trigger. He flies closer still, so close that the bomber fills his entire canopy. The American crew spots him instantly. Panic spreads through the B-17 like electricity. "Bandit! Bandit! 6 o'clock!" someone yells. But no guns fire back. They can't. The guns are frozen or destroyed. The men simply watch, waiting for the inevitable. Inside the cockpit, Charlie Brown stares out of the fractured side window and sees the BF-109 hovering off his wingtip. The German pilot's face is calm, unreadable. His finger isn't on the trigger. The two planes drift side by side through the pale December sky. Hunter and prey, perfectly still amid the wreckage of war. For a few long seconds, they only look at each other. Charlie's mind races. Is he toying with us? Is he waiting for us to make a move? Then, unexpectedly, the German points downward with a gloved hand, slow, deliberate. He's telling us to land, Pinky mutters. He wants us to put down in Germany. Charlie shakes his head, jaw tight. Not a chance. We'd be prisoners before sunset. Stigler repeats the gesture, pointing down again, more urgently this time. His other hand taps toward the ground, then swings toward the west. A clear message. Land, or you won't make it home. The Americans don't understand. From their perspective, it's a threat, a demand for surrender. Pinky grips the yoke tighter, muttering, "If he fires, we're done." Stigler can sense the confusion. He feels a wave of frustration, and then empathy. He thinks of his brother, lost early in the war, and wonders how many times another pilot had stood over him with the same choice. He edges closer to the bomber's nose, just enough for the pilot to see him clearly. Their eyes meet through the fractured glass. Two men separated by language, politics, and war, yet united by the exhaustion that only soldiers understand. Stigler raises one hand in salute. A slow, precise motion, not of victory, but of respect. For a moment, Charlie doesn't move. Then he nods, faintly, unsure if it means thank you or simply goodbye. The German holds his position alongside the crippled bomber as they pass over a ring of German flak batteries. Gunners on the ground spot the strange sight, a Luftwaffe fighter escorting an American bomber, and hold their fire, uncertain what they're seeing. Stigler stays with them for several minutes, guiding them out of the danger zone. Then, when he's sure they are clear, he looks one last time toward the American pilot. He mouths a single word, Sweden. Pointing west, he gestures for them to head toward neutral airspace. But Charlie, misreading the motion, only stares back in confusion. Stigler realizes there's nothing more he can do. He dips his wing, salutes once more, and banks away into the gray light. Inside the bomber, no one speaks. The German fighter disappears into the clouds, leaving behind only the faint shimmer of his contrail. The sky is silent again, except for the ragged breath of the surviving crew. Charlie watches him go, unable to comprehend what just happened. He could have killed us, Pinky says softly. He should have. But Charlie shakes his head. No, he couldn't. For the first time that day, the young pilot feels something stronger than fear. It isn't relief, it's awe. Awe that mercy still existed, even here, where mercy had no place. As the BF-109 vanishes into the clouds, the crew of Ye Old Pub is left to drift westward alone, battered, bleeding, but alive. Carried not by their engines, but by a decision made by the enemy who refused to be one. The German coast slips away beneath them, gray and cold beneath the dying afternoon sun. Ye Old Pub drifts westward, low and heavy, its shadow trembling across the snow-dusted fields below. The crew barely speaks. The adrenaline that had carried them through the battle now fades into stunned silence. For the first time in hours, there are no explosions, no tracer fire, no death clawing at the door. Only the rhythmic groan of the engines. And even that is fading. Pinky breaks the quiet. He didn't fire, not once. Charlie doesn't answer at first. His eyes stay on the horizon, where the gray clouds melt into the North Sea. No, he finally says. He saw us, really saw us. The others glance at one another, unsure what to make of it. Gratitude and disbelief mix uneasily in the air. Think he ran out of ammo? Blackie asks, almost hopefully. Maybe, says Doc. Or maybe he just changed his mind. No one knows. The only thing certain is that they're still alive. And that shouldn't be possible. The bomber's interior is a frozen tomb. Frost covers the walls, and the blood on the floor has turned to ice. Doc works over Russian, still unconscious, his pulse faint but present. He's holding on, Doc mutters. By some miracle. Outside, the engines cough again. Engine 4 sputters, then steadies for a few seconds before fading to a low drone. The altimeter needle begins to fall. Altitude's dropping, Pinky warns. Ease her down, Charlie says. Keep her just above stall speed. If we flame out, we ditch. Below them, the North Sea stretches endless and dark. A cold grave waiting with open arms. The waves gleam faintly beneath the fading light. Every man aboard knows what that water means. Minutes pass. The bomber drifts lower, skimming the clouds at barely 1,000 feet. Fuel gauges edge toward empty. The wind whistles through the holes in the fuselage like ghostly voices. Then faintly, through the static, a new sound emerges. The low growl of approaching engines. Blackie twists in his seat. Contact! 2 o'clock high. Pinky's hand tightens on the yoke. More fighters? Charlie squints through the cracked glass, then exhales in relief. No. Ours. 2 P-47 Thunderbolts appear from the west, circling the battered B-17 like shepherds guarding a wounded animal. One of them banks close, the pilot raising his hand in salute. Charlie nods back weakly. Thank God, someone whispers. The Thunderbolts stay tight as they cross the coast of England. The crew watches the land appear beneath them, green and gray, dotted with tiny villages, so ordinary and peaceful it almost feels unreal. Charlie fights the controls as they approach the airfield. The landing gear won't lower. Hydraulic lines are gone. Brace for belly landing, he orders. Everybody strapped in. The bomber skims in low. Engines barely holding. The runway rushes toward them. At the last second, Charlie cuts the power and pulls back. The plane hits hard, metal screeching as it skids across the tarmac. Sparks shower the ground like falling stars. When it stops, no one moves for a moment. Then, slowly, one by one, the men breathe again. Roll call, Charlie says quietly. Blackie, here. Pinky, here. Doc's fine. Russian. He's alive, Skipper. Barely, but alive. Only one name remains unanswered. Eki, their tail gunner. The silence that follows says everything. That night, during debriefing, Charlie tells the story. He describes the German fighter that appeared beside them, the salute, the mercy. The room stays quiet as he speaks. When he finishes, the commanding officer leans back in his chair. Don't mention this again, he says simply. Officially, you were never escorted. Understood? Charlie nods. Orders are orders. But as he leaves the room, he glances once more toward the night sky beyond the hangar, a sky where mercy once took flight. No report would ever mention the German pilot that spared them. No medal would ever acknowledge the moment. But in the hearts of the men who lived it, the story would never fade. The war did not end that day. It raged on for another 18 months, swallowing towns, cities, and men by the millions. The old pub was patched, refueled, and sent back into the fight like every other aircraft that could still fly. And yet, for her crew, December 20th, 1943, would never fade. In the weeks that followed, Charlie Brown filled out his mission report as ordered. Damage sustained, crew status, fuel remaining on return. But nowhere in the official paperwork was there a place for what truly happened in that sky over Bremen. When he told his commanding officer about the German pilot who had spared them, the man listened silently, then closed the folder in front of him. "Lieutenant," he said, "there's no record of a German escort. You were alone. Understood?" Charlie hesitated. "Sir, with respect." The officer cut him off. "Mercy toward the enemy is not a story we're telling right now." And that was the end of it. The mission was logged, the report sealed, and the story buried under the noise of war. But the memory stayed. It lived quietly in the space between nightmares and gratitude. Some nights, Charlie would wake suddenly, heart racing, half expecting to see the yellow-nosed fighter hanging in the sky beside him again. Sometimes, in his dreams, he saw the German pilot smile. Sometimes, he saw him fade away. The war finally ended. The world exhaled. Bombers returned home or were scrapped for metal. Bases that once hummed with engines fell silent, overgrown with grass. Men went back to their families, older, quieter, carrying memories too heavy for words. Charlie married, raised children, took an office job, and built a life. But every Christmas, when the air turned cold and still, he would think of that day, of the man who had him in his sights and chose not to pull the trigger. Years turned to decades. The men who had fought that war grew gray and stooped, their medals collecting dust in drawers. The world moved on to new conflicts, new enemies, new stories of valor and vengeance. But history has a way of keeping its unfinished chapters close. Some stories refuse to stay buried. And so, nearly half a century later, an old pilot in America would open a newspaper, glance at a veterans column, and feel the pull of something long unresolved. The need to find the man who had spared his life in the skies above Germany. The war was over. But one question still lingered in the quiet corners of memory. Who was the pilot who chose mercy instead of victory? For more than 40 years, the story slept, tucked away in memory, shared only in quiet conversations and fleeting thoughts. Life had gone on. The war had become history, and the men who fought it had turned gray, their stories fading like old photographs. But some memories do not fade. In 1986, now a retired colonel in West Virginia, Charlie Brown found himself haunted by one question that had never left him. Who was the German pilot? He had lived an entire lifetime since that day. Through peacetime, marriage, children, and the slow rhythm of ordinary days. Yet the face he'd seen through the shattered glass of the B-17 still lingered in his mind. So, one winter evening, he sat at his desk, surrounded by dusty flight logs and fading maps, and decided to find the man who had spared him. He wrote letters to veterans groups, to war museums, to Luftwaffe associations, anyone who might know of a German pilot who had escorted a crippled B-17 over Bremen in December 1943. Most responses were polite but fruitless. Some said it was impossible. Others thought he must have imagined it. Still, Charlie kept searching. Then, one spring morning in 1990, an envelope arrived in his mailbox. It was postmarked Canada. Inside, in careful handwriting, were the words that stopped his heart. "Dear Charlie Brown, I was the one. I am the man you were looking for. Franz Stigler." Franz explained that he had moved to Vancouver after the war, starting a new life far from the ruins of Germany. He had read about Charlie's search in a newsletter and knew instantly that the story could only be theirs. He described the moment in perfect detail. The frozen air, the damaged bomber, the salute. Details no one else could possibly know. Charlie sat in silence for a long time, the letter trembling in his hands. 47 years had passed since the day they'd shared the sky, yet it felt like only yesterday. Later that year, the two men finally met. At a small gathering arranged by mutual friends, Charlie Brown and Franz Stigler faced each other for the first time since that December morning in 1943. Cameras rolled quietly in the background, but neither of them noticed. Charlie stepped forward, eyes glistening. "Franz," he said softly. Stigler's lips quivered as he reached out his arms. "Charlie." They embraced, a long, trembling hug between two men once divided by war, now bound by something far greater. Tears streaked both their faces. The room was silent except for the sound of their laughter through tears. After a moment, Franz leaned close and whispered, "You know, I could never have shot you down. You were like an angel trying to stay in the air." Charlie smiled faintly. "You saved us. You saved my whole crew." Later, during an interview, someone asked Franz what it felt like to finally meet the man whose life he had spared. He paused for a moment, eyes distant, and replied, "He was as precious to me as my own brother. I lost my brother in the war, but I found another one that day." For the next 2 decades, Charlie and Franz remained close friends. They called each other often, celebrated holidays together, and spoke at schools about the power of conscience and honor. When they traveled, they did so side by side, a German and an American, walking together through the history that had once tried to divide them. In 2008, their journey ended almost as poetically as it had begun. Within months of each other, both men passed away, one in the United States, the other in Canada. At Franz's funeral, a small framed photograph of a B-17 and a BF-109 flying wing to wing was placed beside his casket. 2 enemies, 2 pilots, 2 men who proved that mercy can outlast war. The skies over Europe are quiet now. No contrails, no flak, no thunder of engines, only clouds drifting in peace over the same fields where thousands once fell. But somewhere in that endless silence, one story still lingers. A moment when mercy spoke louder than orders. December 20th, 1943. 2 pilots met between life and death, enemies by uniform, brothers by heart. One had every reason to destroy the other. Instead, he chose to protect him. It was not strategy. It was not duty. It was humanity. In a world built on orders and obedience, one man chose conscience. Franz Stigler's decision defied everything the war demanded. And yet, in that defiance, he upheld something purer. The idea that even in our darkest hours, the soul can still choose light. Charlie Brown lived his life carrying that truth. Every Christmas, he would remember the salute through the glass, the unspoken promise that decency can exist even in war. It shaped the man he became. It softened the years that followed, and it reminded him every time he looked at the sky that courage is not always the act of fighting. Sometimes it's the act of sparing. Historians call it an incident of chivalry. Pilots call it a miracle. But perhaps it was something simpler, a moment when one human being refused to forget what it means to be human. After their deaths in 2008, their families kept in touch, American and German, bound together by a single act of grace. On anniversaries, they still write letters. On clear winter mornings, some of them drive to old airfields, look up, and whisper thanks to the men who proved that compassion could outfly hatred. Today, the ruins of Bremen are rebuilt. The skies that once burned with war now carry only passenger planes, children staring out their windows into calm, endless blue. And somewhere above those clouds, perhaps, the echoes of that salute still remain. A silent reminder that even in chaos, we decide who we are. Because sometimes the greatest victories are the ones we never fire. Mercy is not weakness. It is courage in its purest form.